Hello, my name is John Ferreter, and this is going to be a video series on creating sprites for animation within Photoshop and then bringing them into Unity for animation. Right. What we got here is the robotchopped.psd file. You're going to find that. When you open it up, you're going to see a single group called color pieces, and if you open up the group, you're going to see all these different layers that have all the different pieces of our robot. You can see we got our body, got our head. And why these pieces are important is because these are what we're going to use to actually rotate and move around to animate our robot and make him do whatever animations we need. For this video tutorial, we're just going to do a simple idle animation with the robot bobbing his body and head up and down. And this is going to be a simple tutorial. It should only be about 6 to 7 frames, and this is just to get a basic understanding of what you need to do to animate for other things like a walk animation or jump animation. Alright, so we can get started. What we're going to do here first is just duplicate the color pieces group. That way you always have a copy, no matter what happens, no matter if you make an error, you'll always be there. Alright, we're going to rename this idle 1, so that's going to be our first frame. This whole group is going to equal out 1 frame by the time that we're done. And this is going to be our starting frame. He's just standing there, so that's fine. So we could just duplicate it one more time. We'll bring it down and we'll call it idle 2. And this is where we'll actually start moving some of the pieces. So for this first frame, we're just going to bring his head and his body, select those 2 layers, and we're just going to nudge them down a little bit. I leave the first group or the group before it, open just for a little bit of reference to see how much he's gone down. It seems a little bit too much. We could bring him up 1. Now this looks good. So I'm gonna leave that. So that's done. That's how simple it's gonna be. So we're gonna hit Control J, duplicate the group again, and this time we're just gonna call this one idle 3. And for this one, we can move his head and body down just a little bit more. Let me untick idle 1. Bring his head and body down just a little bit more. You can see his arms are way high up, so we're going to grab them for the third frame. Then we're going to bring those down. So if you got something, as you can see, his arms are coming down as well. That looks good. Alright, so once again, we're going to duplicate this, bring it to the bottom, call this one idle 4. And for this one, we're going to have, this one's going to be where his arms follow a little bit of the follow-through principle of animation. So his arms, you see his body stays in the same spot. We can even start to bring his body up a little bit. So we'll do that. We'll just bring it up 1 tick. Alright, that looks good. So we'll duplicate it one more time. Control J. Bring this down, call this idle 5. Now this is where his body's going to make his head and body are going to make a bigger leap up. So let's see. You can see that's how it's looking good. And we could bring the arms up a little bit. Something like that. Let's see how it looks. It looks good. Alright, now one more frame, 1 more or 2 more should do it. Bring out, whoops, forgot to do that. Let's call this one idle 6. So right now he's like that. This would be a good time when you're nearing the end of your animation. You'll want to bring the first group up just so you can see how it's going to loop at the end. It looks like our first frame, he's a little bit lower than our first frame, but that's okay. Because actually we're going to bring his head and body a little higher up than the first frame, because when it loops, we'll bring it all around, and this will be this will add a nice effect to it. So we have that. Yep, he looks a little bit higher up. So then with this, we're going to actually bring the arms back to their original spot. So for this, we need the idle 1. Or they can even be a little higher up, just 1 tick. Alright, so that looks good. Okay. Alright, so once you got all of your frames done and all your body moving around that you think is good, and it's look good to you, you're gonna show all of your groups. And this is so we can begin to make the frames the same size, because this frame is not going to work. We have a lot of blank space over here, we have a lot of blank space over here, that's just not going to work when you're bringing in an animation. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit C, bring in the crop tool. We're going to drag this over to our widest point. That's why we have all of the groups shown, so we can see our widest and our tallest point. He's not going to have a very wide point since we didn't move his arms, but if you were doing a walking animation, his arms were swinging, you'd have a much wider frame size. So we'll bring that in. Top and bottom look good, so we're going to hit enter, and this makes it so all of our frames are going to be the same size no matter what. Okay, alright, that looks good. So now we're going to create, or just drop all these menus down, flatten them all into one image, so that way we have a single frame for each group. So we're going to highlight our idle 1, hit Control E, idle 2, Control E, and then the same process for each individual group. So that way we have all our images. We don't have a group with a bunch of pieces. All right. So now what we're going to do is, this is a little part before we export them out to images. This is where you can do a little bit of color correcting or a little bit of anything. What I saw when I was bringing him down is his legs seem to mash in with his bottom piece. Something like this. It gets a little bit higher, and that's not something that we want. So we're going to select the layer. Just a little quick touch up. Something like this actually will make your animation just seem a little bit more fluid and nice. It only takes a second. So we can get that. We can actually do it to this frame as well. Just so it looks like his legs are when his bottom piece falls down with his body, his legs are slipping in. Same thing here. Oops. Looks good. Let's see, I think this is where you start to get the same length. Okay. So idle 5, he's close to the original spot where his legs were fine, so those will be good. And this is in idle 6, he's a little higher up, so we can just copy this color and just drag that in so his legs don't have that gap. Alright, so that looks good. Alright, now it's time to take these images and export them all into their own individual files so we have our frames for animation. And we're going to do that. We're going to go to File, go to Scripts, go to Export Layers to Files, and this is what we're going to get. This will bring all of our layers into their own individual files, and those will be our frames for animation. So we're going to choose where we want them to go. I already have a folder. Hit OK for that. The prefix I usually leave blank. We're going to want our file type to be PNG24, transparency ticked, and we're going to want trim layers off. Alright, then we're going to hit run. Just let Photoshop do its work. It's going to take everything and just mash everything together. We should get a message that says it was completed successfully. Yep. Alright, and then now we can go and look at our folder. Let's see. Alright, so we got our folder, we got all our images out here, and this is just our last bit of a quick test. If you click on the image and then you just hit the arrow keys, you'll see that you get your animation. You can see here if it looks good or not. And our animation seems to be looking just fine. Alright, so that's the end of this video tutorial on creating the sprite sheets and animating them within Photoshop. And the next video will show you how to bring them into Unity and actually get them animating within the game engine. Alright, thank you.